Tyndall Court facility meeting, our project steering group. First of all, I would like to call for apologies, please.
Mayor and Grant McLeod. Sorry, the Mayor and Grant McLeod.
Thank you. Would someone like to move that these apologies be received? Thank you, Joan.
She's not a member, so we don't need to record that apology.
Jim Palmer, please. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the approval of the previous minutes, which was such a long time ago, 27th of February 2020. Oh my goodness. Would someone like to move that these minutes are a true and correct record? Please. Thank you. And a seconder, please. I'll second it then. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Any things you wish to, matters arising from the minutes? Nothing? Right. Right, we'll move on now. We're just going to bring our landscape presentation forward. So, Tori, would you like to?
I might just do a brief.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Okay, well, you would take that with you.
What Tori's about to present is what we were obviously trying to do a few months ago. Is very much an overview of the landscape. So it's very much a concept plan, a conceptual overview, and Tori will take us through that. We need to do some work with other key stakeholders on this as well, so we wanted to have it here today first. But we're going to work with the Arapata has been confirmed as the appropriate person for the Runanga, so we're going to arrange a time with him and at Warrenamani where we can go through both the tour of the building and also the concepts for the landscaping, which gives lots of opportunities for involvement, and also work with the Sport and Rec Trust to make sure that what we're planning doesn't actually interfere with how they'd like to use some of the exterior space. So there's a few bits and pieces to go through there. So we didn't want Tori getting too detailed and too finalised, because otherwise it doesn't actually make a real involvement of the other key stakeholders. So maybe Tori, if you could go through what you've got, and then we'll take questions at the end. And there's the and that moves the slides on too. Yeah, and you need to put the microphone on because the live streaming.
Thank you, Craig. So I'm sure you're all aware of where the sports facility is located, but this is just to give a bit of reference. I think you've been out there everyone's been out there for a site visit, but you know, we're next to Manpower Oval, over the road from Maria Andrews, and existing hockey here. So I'm just going to take you through a few slides, starting from quite a broad scale, and then hone in on a few details.
Yeah, because it's live streaming.
Thank you. That's right. So as I said, I'm sure you are all aware of the positioning, but just to take you through it. So we have the boundaries of the facility here. The area that's highlighted is the area that's landscape designed at the moment, and the concept that I'm going to talk to you about today. You sort of see the faded out areas, which are not included in this plan. So around...
Just one thing too. That roading design that's there now, that reflects the new design that's actually currently about to be tendered. The documentation is just getting finalised for that now. So those crossing points, so Tori's been part of that team as well and doing some landscaping across the road, but those crossing points there will be as getting built, and that work is planned to start around September, October this year.
So around the boundary of the site, we've proposed some tree planting, and you're probably immediately drawn to these bright yellow dots. These are my trees. We've proposed some large conifer plantings around the outside, and especially on this southern side here, where they couldn't they wouldn't create any issues with shade. There's a real opportunity there to do some larger plantings. Conifers tend to grow really well out there. We've had great success with conifers over the road at the cemetery over here. So I think they would do really well there. And the idea is to get onto that planting and get them established so they create that boundary and backdrop to the facility. And the red dots along the top there, along Coldstream Road, some beautiful big deciduous trees just to create that really nice entrance avenue effect coming into the facility. So this is our main entry into the facility, into the main car park here. And again, we've got some proposed tree planting within the car park. These green strips are swale systems, stormwater swales. So the runoff from the car park runs into those. And then you can see our pedestrian paths into our main entry point here. At that same entry point, there's a visitor drop-off and bus drop-off zone here, which exits at that point there into a proposed second car park there. This space here is what I'm going to sort of hone in on soon and talk to you a few more details about. That's the canopy space and a second entry into the building, which I think is of equal importance to that entry there, really.
Sorry, just one other thing while we're on the slide. That car park there is not currently part of the current contract with Lees at the moment. So the resource consent, this one here, and this is all in the resource consent. We're starting work at the moment on preparing a resource consent for the tennis development. The council's agreed to put some funding into that. As part of that development, that will be the additional car parking we'll create there. So that's got about 45 or 46 cars from memory. And we're hoping to do that as a variation to Lee's contract. So effectively, when this building is finished, that car park will be done as well. So that's why we've got Tories to include that in the landscaping, because it'll be a vital link for coming across here. So it's not currently in the contract, but it will, when we do the resource consent, we're putting that in. And we have to show a landscape plan for the resource consent anyway, so that will go as part of the resource consent. And just the only last thing here, sorry, Tori, but that's quite a big swale. It'll need some sort of bridge across it. That's indicative at the moment until we've got the final layout of tennis. That's more or less final, but not final enough to actually get dimensions in yet. But there will be, we'll need to get some sort of bridge across that for pedestrian access way. So that one there is just indicative at the moment till we get the final plan. Thanks, Tori.
Thank you. So I'm just going to speak a little bit more about this area here, in particular this drop-off space that I spoke about coming around here. As Craig said, we really do need to strengthen the link to the building from this proposed car park here, and we've done that through creating footbridges similar to the one that Craig was just speaking about to the east. But we've got main pedestrian access coming from Coldstream Road via that path there, so we need to strengthen that. And it also just, I guess, with this becoming a drop-off point, it really does become a second entry to the facility, and it sort of needs to be designed as a welcoming and encouraging space into the building. So I'll just speak a little bit more about that space. Just to give you a bit of scale, and I can flick back to the other one. I'll come back and forth, but just one of these squares here is around 9 meters by 6. So it'll give you an idea of just how big that canopy space is. And to really, I guess there's a risk of it appearing as just a large expanse and not very welcoming. So to sort of make it feel a little bit more friendly, we've proposed some quite large furniture within that space. And while designing that, the most important thing was again to encourage that pedestrian movement in from that car park and from that entry, which was down there. You'll have people moving right across it into here. coming across there. So we've really tried to strengthen that line, and while we have got that proposed the big furniture in there, sort of keeping that pedestrian flow open across there. And we've put a few measurements in here again, just so you can understand the scale of it, but also to show that we can keep paths clear for service vehicles, emergency vehicles. For example, down here we've got 6 metres between the proposed furniture there and the building. We do also have these little squares, the canopy poles, so it's important to factor those into with pedestrian and vehicle movement around that space. So I've proposed some large decking platform seating. These are these squares here. This decking here is ground level, again to strengthen that pedestrian access into the space. But the idea of those large platform decking areas is really to be multi-use. Again, to sort of break up the expanse of the space, but also to create an area where teams might meet if they were to get off a bus and gather there before events, and just for people to sit out there and wait and do whatever they like, really spend some time within that space, so it's not just a transitional space. They're not just coming and going, moving out of it. I'll just go through quickly some of the surfaces. So we've proposed exposed aggregate for within these squares. These light green ones here are grass, and then some planting areas, again to break up the surface a little, make it look a little softer. But there's also the opportunity there to put some things with a little bit of height within it, sort of working with the vertical element of the canopy poles there. Up here we've proposed some bench seating, and as Craig said, the style of these platform seats and these bench seats, we would really like to get an idea from speaking to you and speaking to others of how we best bring in the style and the materials of those, and get a unique flavour, I guess, to this facility. So just speak a little bit more about that. These are just some ideas. These are the examples that were on the previous page. This is at Christchurch Airport. You may have seen it. But what I liked about this is that it brings in some of the landscape into the design of it, and it's quite unique to that space and to the environment. That's my little boy Ruffy, probably doing what he's not meant to be doing on those seats, jumping over them. But I guess it indicates that they can be used in a variety of ways. It could be used by groups or by individuals. And then I've just indicated a few materials, which again, I think could be really unique to the project, and we can come up with some different designs and use of materials there. Following on from that, there's not a great deal of space for landscaping at this entry point, but I'd like that furniture there, which I've proposed as a planter, with plants of a little bit of height, and a timber surround to be of a similar style to the seating at this space, which I was just speaking about. And I believe Craig's going to speak to this one. This is the area which we have costed for the project.
So actually, Troy, can we just, oh, I got that slide. Actually, can you go back to the slide? So can go back, of course. Yeah. So basically, at the moment, the concept of this is, obviously, we've said we've got to refine it with the other parties, but the concept of it is that all these hard surfaces here will be, the exposed ag and the asphalt will be done by lease, so they'll form part of the contract. We will then probably do these, when I say ourselves, with our own contract, which could be lease, but they can be done at quite a late stage when we know how we are for money. So we don't need to commit to those as of today. We do need to commit to some of this hard surfacing. So basically, when we designed this building, Warren and Marnie, we didn't put a lot of design work into this because we always knew it was something that had to happen later, because at the time we didn't even know if we were going to be able to build it financially. So our resource consent at the moment is subject to a landscaping plan coming. So while we have got resource consent to proceed, we do need to submit a landscaping plan. In the current contract with Lees, all of this asphalt area is exposed ag. Exposed ag right around here is exposed ag. These hard surfaces in here are asphalt. And that was to give you some sort of dry entryway under your feet, so you're not traipsing through grass to get into the doors. What we've worked out, and ACOM have done some costing for this, we could effectively substitute putting exposed ag in here, which is going to look quite attractive, and all these grids here too. That was exposed ag in the contract. We're proposing to put all those grids as asphalt and then the exposed ag in the large squares. And as an example, that's 6.8 by 5.8 metres. That's one of the smaller ones. It's huge areas. That is roughly cost neutral, because if we take out all the exposed ag here and substitute it for asphalt, we get enough to do this because this is easier laying as well. So basically, almost reversing what was in the contract. But we do need to be able to confirm that with Lees fairly soon, because they're doing prep in that very soon. But we've got exposed ag samples getting prepared by Ready Mix now. So Tori has identified what we think is a suitable exposed ag mix, which is what was actually used at Ruataniwha Centre. And Ready Mix is doing a sample now for to come back to Warren and Marnie and us to look at. So basically that could be done, swapped out now with no effect on the budget. But for the full landscaping plan, now it excludes these red trees. So well, they're not red, but the red dots. We're proposing to talk to Rangiora actually Community Board about the potential for using some of the entranceway landscaping money they've got to do that. Now, we haven't been there yet, but I have had a preliminary conversation with a couple of the members about it. So once we've been here, we'll have a chat to them about that. So in the costing we've got done for the landscaping at the moment, we haven't included that row of trees. We haven't also included this, because that can be done. It would be great to have, but it could be done at some time when we see how we're going with money. So that's excluding. So what we've costed is all of what you've seen in here. And that is, there's a shortfall of what we've got in the current contract of around 150,000. Now that will vary a bit depending on the exact seating and decking and that which we get. So ACOM rostered the costing for us, and we just put effectively some allowances in there for furniture, because until the detailed design's done and get costing, we don't know. But it's around 150,000 shortfall, because we always knew when the contract went for tender, there was minimalistic landscaping in it. So we knew we had to do more. We've worked, and I've looked through the financials, and we think at the moment that there is enough in the contingency to allow for about an extra 150,000 going for landscaping, but that doesn't need to be committed today, because we can wait till much further down the track when we actually do commit any of that. So if there's something unexpected comes, which we hope not, of course, but if there's something we actually have to use it for, we're not committing that. All we really need to commit, when I say today, I don't mean literally today, all we need to do is change those surfaces that I mentioned, and that's about it, effectively, and the rest can be done at some stage. We'd ideally like it all done when we open, but that's a year away, and we'll get a lot closer with budget, and we'll also get some prices, and it may be cheaper for us to get our own contractors to price that. We'll get a price from Lees, but it may be cheaper for us to do it. We don't know. We'll certainly probably use Delta to do the planting, because we tend to get cheaper rates there. So that outline there is what we're doing now. This landscaping here on that car park will be done as part of that tennis contract. So when we let the contract for, because that'll be part of the resource consent, when we let the contract. So the concept with tennis is that we, as the council, builds the undersurfacing for that court, so effectively an asphalt surface, and we put power and water connections in, etc., which are actually in now to the boundary, or will be. And then the tennis clubs put the final playing surface on, and the nets and fencing and all the rest of it. So we'll do that, and we'll do that. So we've got Emma Fraser, who did the resource consent for this, is working on the resource consent for that now, and Pal Fennick are doing that detailed design in there. So that's how it sort of fits together with the budget. But and that will get refined a bit further as we get further down the track with what we're actually doing, but that's the sort of scale of magnitude. And ACOM spent quite a bit of time going through what was already in the contract, and that's with Tory. You know, changing those surfaces seemed to make good good sense. But when Richard and your team were doing it, we always knew we had to do some landscaping out in that. It was just done as a minimalistic thing. So we're happy to take any questions.
Yes, Jo.
Thank you. Probably 3 questions. What is that building on the south end there that's very light? Is that done? No, on the south end. No, that building there. What is it?
It's a large depression in the soil surface to collect water.
Oh, I'm
So
with you now. Yep, I'm with you. All right, that's great. Thank you.
What happens is these swales around here
Yeah,
all have some height, so when they fill it,
I'm with you. I've got it. Yeah.
so large, and this
Yeah.
large, but that is reflecting the slopes.
Yep.
And that space there is reserved for, it'll just be grass at the
Extension.
moment, for expansion.
Right. And my second question is it the intention to plant the perimeter trees this winter?
No. Because we haven't got any budget for it at the moment.
All right.
So, and I've checked with Chris, that's right, there's nothing in the green space budget for the current year. We didn't put anything on the endeavour to
All
try
right.
and keep rates down. So there's nothing in there.
All
for
right.
that.
And my third question is, where are we at with the tennis clubs? With my understanding is that they're going to put a building in the middle of the south end, and just there.
Yep.
And where are we at with that? Is that been planned, or have there been designs drawn up?
Yes,
or-
we need some sort of design to put a resource consent in. So they have given a concept design to us. So we've got that. So the resource consent will actually be for the 10 tennis courts plus the club rooms and associated car parking. Whether that building's ever, when that's built is another matter, because they've got to get funding for that. But on day one, if tennis is operating, they can use the toilet facilities over here. So it could operate on day one without that building. We will put, we're running power ducts and water ducts through there ready for the building to go in. So when the asphalt surface goes down, the ducts will be there. But when the building happens, we don't know.
And just last one, lighting, is that included in what's happening initially?
For tennis? No, what we're doing for tennis is we're getting a lighting design done. We as the council put the ducts in for the lights to eventually be connected. So we put the cabling in at the appropriate places. So lighting design is part of the resource consent. And then they install the lights. So we're basically doing the infrastructure effectively. So when we sized the transformer for this complex, that was built into it. So there's provision on that transformer, enough capacity to cope with lights for tennis. And also, we don't know in the future, but when these sports fields are developed, they could be lit as well. We don't know. So we've got enough capacity there. And we've also run a duct down to about there actually, the corner of that sports field. So we can develop those sports fields and put power if that's desired without digging up this driveway. So the concept is this: when this is finished, it's finished.
And there will be sewer to where that building's going to be on the tennis club?
Yeah, so we'll put a sewer, it's a good point, Joan, and that has to be pumped back because ours is a pump system as well, so it will link in, but it's a very small capacity compared to this. So it's, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
just a couple. Can you go back to the forecourt plan, please, Craig? Yeah, that one. The vehicle access that you've talked about, in the original concept, there needs to be room for food carts or something like that to get in because we can't manufacture food on site. So that's all right, even with those grass spaces, there'll be plenty.
Well, you've got a 6 metre carriageway there effectively.
Yeah.
So it's quite wide to get to most food, or they could go out here. I mean,
I have no idea either.
No,
But
exactly.
no, that's all right. So
you've got a huge area at the front, which potentially they would like because it's highly visible.
Yep.
But don't know, or they could come down here.
Yeah, okay. So there's plenty of room for that. Craig and I have had a wee preliminary meeting. Michael's concept is that some of the sports teams will want to warm up outside, so there's plenty of space for that, I take it. My other one was the side door into the gym, which is that black line up in the top right-hand corner. He wants to have a running track in the gym, running outside. So those surfaces will all be the one level.
So we've got that design now, Don, that the door doesn't have a threshold, thank you. So you can come flat out from that door. And that's still, there's a 7 metre gap there between the edge of the building and that seat.
Okay.
I mean, we'll check that with Mike. But
No,
so we've got the indicative running track
Yeah.
Outlined on the plan now, just indicative. You can't see it this one, but it fits in.
Okay, no, that's fine. You know, I've got no idea what he's really thinking, but I'm more conscious of different surfaces where some might be slippery and others aren't, but I don't even know if he's thinking of covering it with a...
He was thinking of, the plan is that they'll have a rolled out artificial grass mat type stuff, like they've got down at Southbrook now.
Okay, no, that's cool.
And
thank you.
We measured that when we designed the building to make sure that there was room.
Enough room. Yeah, okay, no, that's cool. Thank you.
Quick one. In the car park design for the main car park, where trees are, and I like the trees, don't get me wrong, where the trees are intended, they were provided for in the car park assessment in terms of they're not replacing an existing car park, so they are still giving effect to the consented requirements of car parks.
No. That car park design there, Jim, is exactly what was submitted.
Cool.
I've put deciduous at the moment. I'm happy to take some ideas. Nothing's set in stone, but I've proposed deciduous. I've chosen hornbeam, which I'd say it's a really tidy leaf dropper. While it does drop leaves in late autumn, they're quite, they're not the sort of leaves to get all sort of, you know, gunk things up. They don't get all slippery and make a real mess. They go really dry and sort of almost blow away. So that they are deciduous, but I'm happy to take ideas on that if you'd prefer an evergreen.
I'm just conscious that when you engage with Arapata and others, if the reserve name has which they've been invited to submit a name, they would probably like to see represented in the design of the broader scheme native features. So that's why I just raise that as a matter to think about.
Absolutely right, and that's why we didn't want to get this too developed, because otherwise Arapata will be getting talked to rather than we would like to have a discussion with and get his feedback and on all of those aspects, because you're absolutely right, whatever they're thinking of. And also they may have, we've talked to conifers here, but you know, they may have a preference for whatever. Don't know, but yeah, that's why we wanted to not get this much more developed than it is now, to actually start those conversations. Otherwise we're sort of a bit saying this is what we're building rather than, you know. And there's also potential in here if there's some pattern he wants in the, you know, like you did a pattern in some of the squares at one of the other playground at Kaipua. Well, I've got that sort of seats there, but you know, there is potential for that sort of thing as well, depending on what he wants. And the concept of that is we'll meet in Waimakariri and we'll have the 3D walkthrough of the building as well as this, so he gets an overall impression of scale and magnitude, because that 3D one money I've got is really good for getting that height and dimensions. If you only seen a 1D plan, it looks quite different.
I can see a desire, particularly in the forecourt spaces, for there to be a significant design component, and probably reflected in the selection of vegetation or planting that might go in there as well, I suspect.
I've just got a quick question. Lighting for the canopy area, I understand, because Andy's just kindly told me, that there is lighting on the outside of the building, which can be pointed in different directions, and there's also some lighting poles in various areas as well, but the lighting for the canopy, we might have to give some consideration to, just because of the sheer scale of it. That may have already been considered, but if it's a main walkway and it's a drop-off area, then you've got a large piece in the middle which is going to have to be well lit, because a lot of the playing time is going to be winter after dark.
Yeah, I think, yes, it's a very good point. And I'd have to go back to Pal Phoenix, Tony, who did the lighting design, but I do remember that being discussed, but I can't remember what the outcome was. But I know it was talked about, and I had a feeling, but I could be completely wrong, Chris, I had a feeling that sort of down there was some lighting, but I don't know. But we will check it. Richard might know.
I might not. I think that we may have got as far as provision for cabling in the frame, awaiting selection of fittings depending on what the outcome was. So the idea, Chris, would be overhead lighting for the reasons you raise, but obviously subject to confirmation as all this gets developed. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now I've got my memory correct. Tony we were to produce a landscaping plan and then come back to Tony. So you're right, there's cabling there now, but he wanted to get this sort of thing done. So we've got to come back to him. So there's cabling being put on the top, but we've got to come back to him with the landscaping design so he can get the lights right. And it is potentially possible to bring them all of these corners are poles, so it is possible to mount, there's plenty of mounting spaces there. But he definitely wants to look at this.
Cool. One other question on the west side of the building and the south side, that appears to be a swale all the way around there. In terms of flat access for building maintenance, is there sufficient room for vehicles to, and I'm thinking about a high ebb that may be needed to deal with any matter on that west side of that building, whether there is sufficient space between the building footprint and the swale to enable, I'll call it a maintenance vehicle to safely anchor there.
You've actually got a 2 metre asphalt path that runs down the side. You see that grey section between the swale? That's free height, so you could get a scissor lift or something down that path at 2 metres. But the depression of the swale, it isn't a huge amount. It's not a really very deep swale. It's just a runoff channel, really. So it's actually quite wide, but quite shallow. So if you needed to mow that swale, you could easily get that mowed as well on that side.
We get a snow event and we end up with something that needs sorting at the top, on the roof from that side. You don't want to have to scaffold it or anything outrageous like that.
So do we comply with the fire exits and fire compliance with just a 2 metre on that west
Yeah,
side?
that's why the 2 metres are there. You see those fire doors along the edge of the plan.
Yeah, but if you
It's-
had to get a fire truck down there, you wouldn't get with 2 metres.
Oh, no, well, the fire truck could just drive adjacent to the building. The 2 metres is for getting people out. So if there's a crowd exiting out, they've got room to beetle along the side of the building in an unobstructed way.
Yeah, the
It's all been thorough reviewed by the fire engineers and our building consent people for exits.
Yeah, the strategy is the fire truck will use the main car park. The actual fire connection, for the connection of the truck is actually in the access way between halfway down that car park, but for the access way into the tennis area. So the intention is the truck will come racing up that drive, and then it will connect into its hose point there, and then it will fight the fire from that east side. The west side is literally just for occupation, to get out. The actual fighting of the fire will be dealt with elsewhere, and also the SVR rooms on that east side as well. So they'll be connecting into that. So that'll be their main point for fighting any fires going forward.
As part of the design, we actually met with this room. Actually, we met with fire service, the local fire service as well as Canterbury one. So the local one's been in. They were heavily involved in the design with Daryl from Homes Fire, who did all this, and they were very happy with that, the way it's configured. Because we did that quite early on to make sure it wasn't going to be an issue later.
I've just got a question to Tori, please. The planting along in that car park area and also along the main road area, Coldstream Road, is that bearing in mind with the dampness and we're not wanting to shade too much in that area, is that important to have a different type of planting there rather than a heavy bush type?
With the tree
Yes,
planting? Or?
yes.
Yes, yeah. I think not only the visual aspect of having deciduous trees along there, but with being the red dots, but also, yes, it will stop shading in winter if deciduous. So beneath it at the moment, we've only proposed grass for that frontage, which I think would be sort of a nice visual relief. You can see right into the facility. So I haven't proposed any shrub planting along there at this point.
So in the car parking itself, what type of planting do you envisage doing that? Smaller, shorter, lower ones or some higher?
Yes, the swales would predominantly be grass, so they can be mown because they're quite a shallow grade, so you can. But beneath the trees, a small shrub,
Right.
most likely a native.
Yeah. Thank you. So it'll give a nice visual look to it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one, if I may be so bold. The future hockey field, which isn't in the plan, is that just going to be grass?
So basically, thanks, John. Thanks, Wendy. At the moment, we're hoping instead to have that completed and this all completed. Tennis at some stage may be done at the same time, who knows. This in here, this and this. Well, we've got quite a lot of topsoil on site now in those big mounds. Plan is just to spread that roughly. When I say roughly, it won't be laser leveled or anything else, just roughly, and then just grassed. So we've worked on that with Grant Reburn from Green Space, and he's quite happy with that. So we think we've got plenty of soil. There's actually quite a big drop on that side there. That's doesn't show it there, but it's actually quite a big slope, and it's very uneven ground there at the moment. There's huge big cavities in it. So it does need quite a bit of leveling. That's not too bad actually, but that's the worst area. So yeah, we'll just grass all that and then leave it. And that'll just be mowed with a big tractor mower, so it's pretty cheap to maintain.
And it will be open for the public to be able to use, so equally open to the trust to be able to use. I understand that you do.
That building there doesn't exist now either. That's gone.
Sorry, quick question.
Yes.
More a comment. Thanks, Tori. We, as Craig mentioned, and as the room's aware, we have a very good 3D model of the building and the canopy space, so we can populate it when you're ready with some elements, so that perhaps next meeting or whatever, there's something to show in terms of the scale and the arrangement of things. I think just as a comment, I think it's really marvellous that this whole part of the project is likely to proceed in some form, because although a huge amount of effort has gone into what's inside the building in terms of the public's use of it, this will be a seriously valuable space. Facing north, northwest. It'll be sunny. It'll be sheltered. And as Tori and Craig have mentioned, when big groups of people arrive by bus, it is actually really the real front door of the building. They'll sort of discharge and have plenty of room to meet and, as Don said, the sort of training and moving around and doing of things. And they'll come in that what we've always talked about is the second front door, which I think when people arrive en masse will actually be the front door, because the car park side is really understood for people who are arriving by car in small groups, and they'll just come in, and there's not a lot of gathering space there for any large numbers of people. So I guess in my long-winded way, what I'm saying is that if we can populate that outdoor room, which is what it is, with the kinds of things that Tori's proposing, which are essentially a mix of hard paving and grass and these island elements, I think it'll be really useful and really compelling, and it'll be the sort of part of the mental picture of the building that people have in their mind when they think, right, we're going to go to this facility. That's the bit that they will be thinking of. And really all the functional things that we've spent so much time nutting out will be very background in their mind. So yeah, I think it's great, and it's nicely organised that we don't have to commit to the expenditure until at the end of the job when we know where we're at, which I think is great. So thank you. That's perfect.
Thank you. Any other questions? So we'll so what we'll deal with now, which is the architectural update, please.
Well, I've got very little to update that Craig won't cover in the report, other than things are steaming along nicely. There have been no dramatic hold-ups or changes or things that have been discovered. Craig will report on what has been going on. There's obviously been a program adjustment as a result of the lockdown, but again, the impact of that has been fairly minimal, remarkably. And I think we're sort of fortunate that we're underway before all that unfolded fairly seriously, so the disruption wasn't so big. Yes, I think that's all I have to say really on that one.
Any questions you'd like to? Thank you. Right, well, we'll move on then to the project manager's report, please, which we do have attached. Thank you.
Thanks. Just at the outset, and I want to say this at the start of the meeting, but it was better to spend the time on the landscaping, that I'd like to pass on Council's appreciation to the way that ACOM and Warren and Lee's kept going through the lockdown. There was lots and lots of emails and phone calls, and we did actually make, although obviously no progress on the ground, but there's a lot of shop drawings getting processed, and a lot of the Lees were spending a lot of time with Warren and ACOM just working out some of the detail that we hadn't actually addressed at the time when you had to be done. So while we've lost a month in terms of the actual program, I think that month that we were shut down, I'm very grateful for the way that ACOM and Warren worked, and really it made no difference. It would have been nicer to meet in person, but certainly from the comfort of my house, I could be talking to various people at various times, and it was really good. And you didn't really notice, apart from the different backgrounds when I was talking to Andy, or it was all just much the same. So I think we're very grateful, and particularly grateful to the way that Lee's used that opportunity to keep progressing shop drawings. And the other thing that Lee's been very good with, we've had some conversations with them, because one of the big risks down there now with the effect of the virus is supply chain and timing, which we just don't know. No one does. So what they've done, they already were well advanced in terms of placing orders for everything. they've fast tracked that a bit more to get some earlier deliveries so that it doesn't hold up the project. So we've got the luxury of space up there, so there's plenty of room to store stuff. We need a container or whatever, they've got one they can put up there. So they are working very hard now to get orders confirmed for everything and get stuff arriving, because there is that risk. No one knows what the outcome will be, but the sooner stuff gets here, the better. And we have also, we were very lucky. If the lockdown had to happen, it couldn't have been a better time for the project, because basically the big cranes were able to be removed off site for the steel and didn't have to come back. So there was no doubling up of that. So when the lockdown were allowed to start, they started that day because they had all the roofing material there. There was a lot of material there and they could start working on the concrete as well. So the new completion date, they've agreed, will be the 18th of June, which effectively is a month later than the original one. So it's 4-week delay. And of course, we don't know, there could still be weather delays, but that happens in any contract. But no, in terms of the actual lockdown, I think it's seemed pretty realistic to us. And we got them to propose a program. We didn't tell them what it had to be. We waited for them to do a program, and they feel quite confident that they will be able to deliver on that. And certainly at the moment, they're pretty much on track. I mean, this weather this week hasn't been great, but hopefully that will improve. So that's in that report, that notes the new contract completion date. We've also done some work. Andy and I met yesterday with our building team with Kathy Stubbs, because most of you remember that when we got the building consent for the project, we excluded the reception juice counter. And Waimakariri have done some more work on that. So we met with them yesterday, and we've just got to get back to Sam, but there's just a couple of really minor tweaks which only an architect would notice. And that's ready to be lodged, so we'll lodge that. It meets the food hygiene handling requirements, which are quite strict. So we're pretty confident we should be able to go ahead and get that done, and get that amendment lodged in the next couple of weeks, sort of thing. So it's very minor amendments, which is positive. As I've already mentioned, we've got agreement with from the Renanga, but Arapata is definitely the person to be working with. I've made contact with him. Just got to check with Richard a time to come into Waimakariri, and we'll bring Tori in as well. But I think that's quite keen to get involved with that, and it's really important. I think it gets that perspective of the building, hence the being at Waimakariri offices. The report also, you'll remember, again, it's hard to remember, it's months ago, but we had a discussion late last year actually about some flooring changes, so that the trust was in a potentially stronger position, maybe to negotiate a better deal with for the primary supply, and potentially doing their other rubber flooring and all that area. We lodged that with Lee's. We've had the price confirmed now back, and you'll see that in the report. This is credit of 72,398.40. So this group doesn't have the power to amend the heads of agreement, because the heads of agreement has $1 million contribution from the trust, but it would have to be a report to council, because council is the only one who can do that. So you're asked as a group to support staff preparing a report for council on that basis. Otherwise, I'm happy to take, the only other thing is it's good news that one of the other concerns up there from Lee's has always been when they could get the major power supply connected, because their temporary power was very light capacity, so it was it was in danger of holding up the building project. And anyway, the good news is that we just had a ring from Lee's before. There's no power on site today, and they're putting in the transformer's already been there, but it was in pre-lockdown, but they're connecting it today. So that means they'll get the full power supply, which again will avoid any holdups down the future. So hopefully that connection works. So we're not, we normally go up there on a Thursday, but we're not today because there's no power. But so that's good news that that's actually happening. And it also means that the roading project won't be affected either, because there's a power pole there now for the temporary power supply, which is about there actually, roughly. So it was going to be, we need to get that gone before the roading contract could start. So that's about to go to tender now. And at the moment, the time frame, we've worked with Lee's and with our team from PDU who are doing that project, and Joanne, etc., that we need services on fairly soon, because at the moment we can't do any water testing because there's no water. So what the plan is now that we'll have a water connection through by, if all goes well and the council accepts the tender, by December, and sewer at the same time. So the water and sewer ducts have to come down that side of the road and then come across. So we've got them, the contractor lease has them to the gate now. Under the time frame that we're working to, that's going out in the tender that has to be completed by December, which will mean that Lees can do all that testing early next year, which they'll need to get commissioning, etc. Because there's nothing worse than being too far down the track and trying to do a water pressure test and then find you've got an issue. So they've done some preliminary tests just with pumps, but it's pretty hard to do too much more. So that's good that that's happening, and Lees have said that they'll just work in with the roadworks as and when it happens. But the good thing is the main traffic for hockey will be over. I mean, there is some summer league play, but it's not much. And again, Maria Andrews won't be in much use either then. So it means that the disruption to other users down there will be minimised. And happy to answer any questions anyone's got.
The neighbours across the road, how can we help them during that time of managing the road? Yeah. Oh.
No, we will. So when we've got a tender let, they are aware of the design. When we've got a tender let and we have a contractor, our team Glenn will meet with them and work out access and everything else. But they are mindful that needs to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to confirm that will be part of the traffic management plan. So that access and egress will need to be carefully thought out. So Glenn will consult with them quite heavily, I would imagine, to get that through the process.
Excellent. Thank you.
Two questions, and thanks for your update and report. Progress looks great. Supply chain continuity and clearly getting the steel here was fundamental to the project. In your mind, are there any elements of the building that are dependent on international supply chain, which are the most critical or sensitive from your perspective? So that's the first question. And the second relates to Lees. I see, and great for them, they've been very successful in securing a major Antarctic contract out of Christchurch, which is awesome. Do you anticipate that having any impact on their capacity or focus for this project?
I'll answer that one. The Lees ones first. I'm sorry, I can't remember the gentleman's name now. I should, but the Southern Regional Manager for Lees rang me to tell me about the Antarctic contract before it was announced publicly, and did reassure me that it wasn't going to impact on our contract. And he also was very good in terms of the lockdown. He rang at the start of the lockdown and rang me during the lockdown on about 3 occasions to check that we're all still happy. So I think they're very mindful of keeping many projects going. So I'm not too concerned about that. And I've been actually very pleased with the level at which they've gone to try and keep that higher level, dialogue going, which has been really good. I've certainly had, the day the lockdown was announced by government, he called me that afternoon and the next morning. So it's been pretty good. And then he said he did ring me about the day it was being publicised, as it were. He did ring me. So I'm not too worried about that. Yeah. There's a lot of things. I mean, the roofing is there now, so we've got the immediate stuff is sorted, which is great, and it's actually going up. The flooring is, it's funny. You look at where something was supposedly manufactured, and I had a conversation the other day with a plumbing supplier who said, Methven taps are assembled in New Zealand, but actually not made here, but it's component parts. So a lot of things that may be saying they're coming from Australia, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's not components still coming from overseas. So the flooring, etc., has been ordered well in advance, and they don't see any issues with that. The heat pumps are probably the major item that are obviously made on demand. And can you update us with that set?
The air handling units are components come from the Far East, but they're fabricated and manufactured in Auckland. So that's not too much of a risk. The biggest risk to the project is the timber flooring, which we know that's coming from America. So obviously that's probably our biggest risk item. We've placed forward orders for it, and we've also placed forward orders for the retractable seating, which is also coming from the States. So they're the two key items, and in fairness, they're the two key elements to the project. The remaining materials and components in the most are coming from, in terms of the specific sports equipment, are coming from Australia. So we should be okay with those as a risk. And the remaining, we are working constantly with Warren Amani and Lees to establish any key things like ceramic tiles, things like that potentially were coming from Europe, and whether we can mitigate some of those processes. The big one we're getting from Europe at the moment is ceramic tiles. We have stuck with them because they've committed to the delivery dates. We don't need those for nearly 8 to 10 months. But we're placing orders now. So we're doing everything we can to give us a window. We're expecting a delay, so we're expecting to we're not going to achieve the target date, but we're actually forward ordering those so we can have a little bit of slack in that program to allow for that. And anything we can re-specify, we are to just try and make sure that we either can source from New Zealand or Australia within the Trans-Tasman area, I suppose is the best way. Problem is flooring does in large come from Europe. So we're sort of are a little bit stuck from Europe. Either the carpets, ceramic tiles, the gym floor is so specialist. It was specified by WAM through historic projects. There was nowhere else we could go for it. But we established that was going to be the key item that could be a downfall. So we've picked it up. We've been in constant contact with them over there, and they have assured us that they can still supply. We have to take a view on that as a supplier. So we're just trying our best to try and get that order, get that in, and get it on a ship, and then we can deal with what we can from there.
Yeah, Jim, I think the prognosis for all of this, we were much more concerned 8 weeks ago, but I think now manufacturing chains are coming back to life quite happily. So I think we should be fine generally. And as Andy's talking about,
I would like to share your optimism, but I think we're going to end up in a second and continuing global wave
of doom
of high levels. So getting those critical components out of those countries as soon as, I think, is really important to the critical path.
Well,
I think from a risk assessment perspective, knowing that we've got a quantity of timber on a ship in transit will be a great relief.
Yeah. But to be fair, when Andy's saying Lees are driving this, they're very mindful of the need to get, and we did commit as a council saying we're happy to pay when materials are on site. So we will be paying a bit earlier than we would have been, but that's fine. So
I'm not doubting anybody's commitment to do the right thing for the project as early as possible, and that's absolutely awesome. I'm just trying to understand what when it does go, if it could go wrong, where will it go wrong and what impact it'll have. And what you're saying to us is it could have quite a significant impact if it went wrong, but you're trying all you can to manage it, and that's all we can ask. So,
and the flooring we don't want to substitute because we did a lot of work with Warren and Marnie on the right flooring at the time. So that's the one thing. If we have to substitute some tiles or something, that's fine. But the flooring in the indoor courts, that's that is mission critical to get from that supplier, because any other building around that's used other products have had issues. So we really do want to. So that's why Lees have confirmed orders for, and they also commented to Andy and I about their subbies as well, that they're working closely with their subbies. They won't use subbies that haven't at least got a track record of successful completion of projects over 5 years. They won't take anyone else, and they have substituted a a couple now painting has changed and something else has
Yeah,
changed.
they've substituted their decorator and their initially appointed subcontractor, they just didn't have a long-standing career with as lead, so they felt that that was a risk item. So they've changed tact and gone to a different supplier just to secure. We're in some uncertain times, so they're just managing their own risk.
Someone like to move this recommendation on the project manager's report, please? Joan, thank you. And Jim, thank you. Joan, would you like to speak?
No, I'm really thrilled that everything's going along very well. Got great confidence in Craig and Lee's and the team at ACOM, and looking forward to seeing the finished product and filling it up. So very exciting. Thank you.
Jim, would you speak?
Yeah, can I just acknowledge, just reinforcing what Craig said earlier, can I just acknowledge the effort and work that the whole team has put to keeping the project on track and progressing, and the way in which that's happening. Really pleased to see the way you're working together. And Craig, thank you for your ongoing stewardship of the project. Always appreciated. Good report, good progress up to, as all things considered. I don't think we could hope to be in a better place than we are on this project. So well done, and look forward to my pessimistic premonitions not coming to the fore, and that the world tracks along gaily and merrily.
And I would just also like to say thank you very much to the whole team. It's wonderful to see this up to where it is, and hopefully we can keep it on track. It'd be lovely with the flooring.
We moved
Yeah.
that recommendation.
Yes,
One thing
we
I
did.
omitted to say, you may recall that we had organised a site meeting back in March, I think, from memory. That was going to be after work. Clearly after work now doesn't work because it's too dark. I've had a conversation with the mayor, and he's happy if we arrange a Saturday meeting, site visit, because if we go during the week, effectively Lee's have to shut down the site for us to be on. So none of us want to delay the project. So I was going to catch up with Carl today from Lee's, but we're doing it Tuesday. So I'll tee something up, and I'll work with Mayor's diary with Rosie, and we'll sort a Saturday out that works. But that's probably the least disruptive to them, and it's still daylight. Once we get back, of course, to September, October, then after work meetings are much easier. But just at the moment, it's too dark. So it hasn't been forgotten.
Thank you. Now, anyone else wish to speak? So I'll move then. All those in favour that the recommendation be approved? And against? It's carried. Thank you. Right, now we're just going to move on. Ross, yes, yep. I'll just sorry. Right, Ross, please. It's your big moment.
Thanks, Weedy. Okay, financial report number 7, dated the 17th of June. Construction budget, as we know, $24.866 million, of which the contingency is 1.271. Progress claims 1 to 8 have been certified, so amount paid to date is 7.6 million, pretty much a third of the way through. Construction contingency, a list of active construction instructions and their cost implications are included in the reader report as usual, and a total forecast contingency expenditure of 489,000, of which 541 are estimated and 52 negative is agreed. I was going to say that if we're a third of the way through on progress claims and we're a third of the way through on construction contingency, that's sort of tracking very well, especially as the COVID-19 claim is within that third. So it is it's actually not decreased, increased by circa $36,000 in the month, and the 5 main items were a credit against the sprinkler valve room hydraulic changes. There was an on-site retention of asbestos contaminated fill, which came in cheaper than we expected, which is great. The floor boxes to the main courts, there are more of them and they are more complex and expensive to do, so they went up. There's a diaphragm ceiling coordination, and I think Andy has mentioned that that's an extra ceiling layer, and maybe there's potential for a credit if we didn't have that.
Yes.
Is that a thought? Yeah. Yep.
We may change some of the ceilings to suit in some areas where we've effectively got a structural diaphragm in plasterboard above, and then we have originally designed a suspended ceiling below. We are just going through that to see whether there is actually a requirement to have effectively two ceilings,
That's right.
and whether the room itself can just be sufficiently functional for just having a plasterboard ceiling rather than a suspended ceiling. So that may produce a credit, but we're just working through that now, and that will probably arrive in next month's PSG.
Just a question from that one, if we may only have one ceiling, it's going to have enough room in it, so there's no going to be condensation drop or anything like that.
No, there won't be any issue there at all. What we're working through at the moment is whether we can get the acoustics at the right rating with the plasterboard ceiling, because effectively it's a hard surface. The current design has a acoustic tile in it, so it softens. You may know or may not know, it's the centre admin area, so it's where the administration guys are going to be sitting on a daily basis. So it needs to be an office space rather than just an in and out space. So we just need to make sure that the lighting's right and the acoustics are right.
And a large swale soak pit item of $30,000. Unfortunately, one of the guys in our office misunderstood the drawing and has measured it a different way to what was actually a reality. So that was sadly a cost. So come to 36,000 extra. So you can see the graph is quite good how it's just going up generally. So 38% of the construction contingency budget is now expended. Of the page, risks, I think it's the same as last time. Still the impact of that COVID-19 outbreak, sort of summarising, Jim has summarised those things, material procurement and program. Further contaminated material exposed during excavation. Obviously we're getting towards the end of that, but there may be a bit more. And the cost of flooring to be installed in lieu of the regular pole, which is the item. Cash flow, you can see that's falling behind, but obviously mainly because of COVID. I don't think we've got the new program yet. Andy, we haven't got a new program yet, have we, from Lee's to plug into our cash flow?
Yes, we have,
Okay.
and that will be passed through. So the EOT claim arrived last month. It's been reviewed and processed and approved, so it can now be transferred.
So it can now get a program. Okay, very good.
Cash flow, because some of this earlier ordering is going to change when some of that cash. So Lee's are working on that at the moment, and we're expecting that fairly soon.
Fantastic. Otherwise, end of report. Any questions?
Just an obvious question, but no doubt that Lee's would have got reimbursed with the shutdown through the government. Would that have been had a subsidy, wage subsidy, while they were not working?
It's a good question. They and ACOM have perused the claim quite thoroughly before we had approved it for payment. Lee's have been very transparent in their claim, so they gave us a detailed itemised list of all of the component parts of what they're potentially able to claim, and then they showed a series of deductions, and the wage subsidy was all part of that. So ACOM reviewed it quite carefully, and it has been agreed and it'll be processed, so they're very transparent.
Thank you.
I'll move that we have receipt of the financial report. Thank you. Craig setting it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Sorry. Anyone have any general business they wish to discuss? I think we've probably thrashed that out. Yeah.
Just one thing for clarity. So after this meeting, we will issue the instruction to Lees to change that hard surfacing. So we'll substitute the exposed ag as we showed on the plan. So we'll do that this week. But we're not committing to anything else. It's just that changing of the hard surface, and all the rest of there's no commitment to that yet. It's just the hard surfacing, because that is affecting them because they're working with ready mix now. So we need to get that sorted. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other questions or comments to make, I'll declare the meeting closed at 11:43. Thank you very much.